Hello friends, this is Jan Curcio and welcome back to Breaking Bread for You, especially to those viewing from outside the United States, with the fifth video in a series on the difficult stories of the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, or the Old Testament. This presentation is about another unnamed and tragic female figure of the Bible, Lot's wife, who is said to have turned into a pillar of salt after defying the instruction of the angel to not look back at the destruction of Sodom. This story has always troubled me in that although the lesson of obedience to God is critical for surviving in dire situations is undeniable, her demise defies belief. Although I can be philosophical in my approach to the story and that turning into the salt of this Dead Sea, the most bitter on the planet, represents her emotional bitterness she held for a lost life she cherished. I'd rather go with the literal explanation as to what really happened to her. We know for sure that she did not make it, given that Lot flees without her, ending up with his two daughters in a cave. So let's begin with our story from Genesis 19 that leads up to the account of the demise of Lot's wife, starting in verse 1. And it reads, "Now the two angels came to Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting in the gate of Sodom." Let me comment here on it being said that Lot was sitting in the gate. Now, the gate of a city was much more than a doorway. It was the city hall of the ancient Near East fortified cities, where elders and magistrates would be seated to officiate in their capacities. Amos tells us, and I quote, "Hate evil, love justice in the gate." 5:15. And Jesus said to Peter, "And upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it." Here Jesus is referring to governments who will attempt to crush his church. And we have witnessed the fulfillment of what Christ stated in our own time when communist China and Russia tried to wipe out Christianity, instead resulting in the establishment of massive underground assemblies of committed Christians. Now, in this frame, we have a Rittmeyer archaeological reconstruction of the city of Sodom. And from archaeological evidence, this city was huge and highly populated. In the red square is the main city gate, where the magistrate's office would have been located. Notice that the depth of the wall would have easily held sizable chambers. Today in the old city of Jerusalem, within the Lion's Gate, a police station is situated. So at this point we can say that Lot was a part of the affluent elite in Sodom and most likely held the office of magistrate. Certainly Lot and his wife had much to leave behind. Getting back to the text, it says, "When Lot saw them, he rose to meet them, and he bowed himself with his face toward the ground. And he said, 'Here now, my lords, please turn into your servant's house and spend the night and wash your feet. Then you may rise early and go on your way.' And they said, 'No, but we will spend the night in the open square.' But he insisted strongly, so they turned into him and entered his house." Let me say here that Lot's insistence that they stay at his home indicates his concern for their safety in a city he knew to be rife with danger, not to mention his keeping with the ancient Near East custom of hospitality towards strangers. Then he made them a feast and baked unleavened bread, and they ate. Now serving the angels unleavened bread, although the regulation of unleavened bread was not established at that time, indicates that he knew that leaven represented sin, and that this would not do for the angelic beings. This is another situation when a law or tradition was written back into a former time or place, in what we call anachronism. Further, the unleavened bread hints at an exodus from Sodom, as was the case with the Hebrews who ate unleavened bread just before their exodus from Egypt. Now back to the story. Now before they lay down, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, both old and young, all the people from every quarter, surrounded the house. And they called to Lot and said to him, Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us that we may know them connily." So Lot went out to them through the doorway, shut the door behind him, and said, "Please, my brethren, do not do so wickedly." Now, according to verse 4, it wasn't just a handful of Sodomites who wanted to rape the angels, for it is said that all the people from every quarter came, indicating that Sodom was, for the most part, homosexual. Lot then tells them, "See now, I have 2 daughters who have not known a man. Please let me bring them out to you, and you may do to them as you wish. Only do nothing to these men, since this is the reason they have come under the shadow of my roof." Here, the solution to protect his angelic guests is to cast his virgin daughters to the wolves, daughters who were betrothed, which closely parallels the story of the Levite and his concubine, whose host offered his virgin daughter, along with the Levite's concubine, to a group of homosexuals who wanted to rape the Levite. Back to the text. "And they said, 'Stand back.' Then the Sodomites said, 'This one Lot came in to stay here in Sodom, and he keeps acting as a judge. Now we will deal worse with you than with them.'" And saying that Lot is acting like a judge substantiates his position as a magistrate, which is why he was found sitting at the gate of the city. And the text says, "So they pressed hard against the man Lot and came near to break down the door. But the men, the angels, reached out their hands and pulled Lot into the house with them and shut the door. And they struck the men who were at the doorway of the house with blindness, both small and great, so that they became weary trying to find the door." Notice that their lust for the angels was so intense that even after being blinded, they continued to go after them. Now, here is where we get into the demise of Lot's wife. "Then the men, the angels, said to Lot, 'Have you anyone else here, son-in-law, your sons, your daughters, and whomever you have in the city? Take them out of this place, for we will destroy this place, because the outcry against them has grown great before the face of the Lord, and the Lord has sent us to destroy it.' So Lot went out and spoke to his sons-in-law, who had married his daughters, and said, 'Get up, get out of this place, for the Lord will destroy the city.' But to his sons-in-law, he seemed to be joking. Now, before we read on, I need to address what appears to be a discrepancy. In verse 8, Lot tells the rapists that his daughters are virgins, but the angels indicate that Lot's daughters are married. And in verse 14, the author tells us that his daughters are indeed married to men who don't take Lot seriously about evacuating Sodom. So what appears to be Lot having lied about his daughters being virgins, his daughters were both virgins and betrothed, which would mean in the culture of the ancient Near East that they were legally married to their betrothed, but remaining virgins until the wedding preparations were completed and a dwelling for the newlyweds was built. Now, getting back to the story. When the morning dawned, the angels urged Lot to hurry, saying, "Arise, take your wife and your daughters who are here, lest you be consumed in the punishment of the city." And while he lingered, the men took hold of his hand, his wife's hand, and the hands of his 2 daughters, the Lord being merciful to him, and they brought him out and set him outside the city. Notice here that this family is lingering. Either they really don't believe destruction is coming to Sodom, or they are gathering as much valuables as they can to carry with them. However, they took nothing with them, for the angels took hold of their hands to get them out of the city in time. And the text reads, "So it came to pass when they had brought them outside that he said, 'Escape for your life. Do not look behind you, nor stay anywhere in the plain. Escape to the mountains, lest you be destroyed.' Then Lot said to them, 'Please know, my Lord, indeed now your servant has found favor in your sight, and you have increased your mercy which you have shown me by saving my life. But I cannot escape to the mountains, lest some evil overtake me and I die. See now, this city is near enough to flee to, and it is a little one. Please let me escape there, and my soul shall live. And he said to him, See, I have favored you concerning this thing also, in that I will not overthrow the city for which you have spoken. Hurry, escape there, for I cannot do anything until you arrive there. Therefore the name of the city was called Zoar. The sun had risen upon the earth when Lot entered Zoar. Then the Lord rained brimstone and fire on Sodom and Gomorrah from the Lord out of the heavens. So he overthrew these cities, all the plain, all the inhabitants of the cities, and what grew on the ground. Now fire and brimstone are expressions of God's wrath throughout the Bible, of which I have found 14 references, 5 of which can be found in the book of Revelation. Back to the story. But his wife looked back behind him, and she became a pillar of salt. I take it that by looking back, Lot's wife hesitated just long enough to be engulfed in fire and brimstone that devastated Sodom and some of the plain they were escaping. Now, in order to understand what really happened to her, we must understand exactly what rained down that would incinerate her flesh while preserving her form, which is what I get from the text. We are told that it was fire and brimstone that rained down on Sodom and Gomorrah. Brimstone means burning stone, a particular flammable stone that, when heated to 444.4 degrees, turns into sulfur dioxide, which in small amounts can cause eye, nose, and throat irritation, but in great amounts can kill, as in the case of the sulfuric gases from a volcanic eruption. When inhaling large amounts of sulfur gases and suffocating ash, along with intensive heat from volcanic pyroclastic blasts, death results. Now, millions of 90% sulfur balls have been found around the Dead Sea, indicating that there had been either volcanic or asteroid explosions in that area, caused by God. With Lot's wife turning into a pillar of salt, what first comes to mind is what I saw in the human and animal remains in Pompeii, resulting from the Vesuvius volcano of August of 79 AD, where over 25 victims were instantly baked and left frozen in positions held when they took their last breath. These petrified human and animal remains were found by archaeologists buried in layers of grayish compressed ash, the same color, by the way, as salt formations found around the Dead Sea. As seen in this frame, we have such a formation by the Dead Sea in the form of a woman, an unofficial and natural monument to Lot's wife. Now, let's examine the archaeological finds that reveal what happened to the victims and recovered articles of Vesuvius and Pompeii, along with that which has been recovered in and around archaeological sites considered to have been Sodom and Gomorrah in the Middle East. Beginning in the 18th century, when a surveying engineer discovered the remains of Pompeii, archaeologists have explored the site in order to discover just what happened to the victims of the Vesuvius volcano of 79 AD. Now, the only eyewitness to the event that recorded what he saw was Pliny the Younger, the nephew of Pliny the Elder, who, although was a witness, died during an attempt to rescue survivors. Pliny the Younger described the massive blast as pushing upward to nearly 20 miles in the sky, forming a dense column of smoke from which spewed suffocating ash and sulfurous rock that rained down on Pompeii, resulting in collapsed roofs that crushed those inside. If that wasn't bad enough, a thick cloud of superheated sulfurous gases, estimated to be 482 degrees Fahrenheit, that was full of fine ash and burning stone, engulfed Pompeii, suffocating and flash cooking all flesh. Scientists estimate that the volcano had a force greater than an atomic bomb, yet incredibly, people and animals had been remarkably preserved being petrified from the combination of the pyroclastic blast that flash cooked the flesh and the immediate layering of fine ash that eventually measured 13 to 20 feet deep. So can we say that what caused Lot's wife to turn into a pillar was the result of superheated pyroclastic blast from either a volcano or from what some suggest to be a massive asteroid exploding over Sodom and Gomorrah at that time? Going with Lot's wife turning into a pillar of salt, it can be said that a pyroclastic blast flash cooked her and that the salt coating on her remains resulted from a salt-laden spray coming up from the Dead Sea due to massive brimstones plunging into the water. I was at the ocean on a very windy day last week where I could feel the salt spray hitting my face, which within a short time had covered my car with a good layer of salt. So in the case of the Sodom and Gomorrah event, large brimstones slamming into the Dead Sea could result in not only large surges of salt water flowing up onto the plain, but salt layering the petrified form that once was Lot's wife. So let's take a look at the archaeology of Sodom and Gomorrah, which has been thought to be located southeast of the southern shore of the Dead Sea. However, there is a great deal more evidence that these infamous cities were located elsewhere. That is in Jordan on the northeastern edge of the Dead Sea, where it connects to the Jordan River, which makes sense since it was there that Lot chose to settle when separating from Abraham. Genesis 13:1. Archaeologist Dr. Steve Collins of Trinity Southwest University and Veritas International University, in his 2010 dig on Tal El-Hammam in Jordan, identified many indicators that align with the Genesis account of Sodom and Gomorrah. Among Collins' finds on the 100-acre site of Tal El-Hammam, which he believes to have been Sodom, are pottery and other articles from that period that were found to have been heated to a degree way beyond that needed to bake pottery, as well as significant ash layering in the excavation and surrounding areas. Most noteworthy is that Collins uncovered human skeletal remains that indicate a sudden traumatic demise as was described in Genesis 19. Since we have no knowledge of volcanic activity in that area, in that time and that place, there has not been located any asteroid impact craters. It is speculated that an asteroid exploded midair, as is often the case, which would fit the description of fire and brimstone raining down on Sodom and Gomorrah. In more recent history, in 1908, an asteroid exploded in midair near Siberia's stony Tungus River, flattening over 1,200 square miles of forest. Now, scientists have found minerals around the Tal El-Hammam site in Jordan that point to such an asteroid event, who estimate that a 10-megaton asteroid explosion devastated that area 3,700 years ago, which would place it in the Bronze Age, the time frame for our story. Royal News of Jordan reported that what clued archaeologist Philip Sylvia from Trinity Southwest University that this was biblical Sodom was that although this was a flourishing fertile area for over 1,000 years, it had been abandoned and permanently left desolate. In examining soil samples, he found that it had become contaminated with sea salt, which undermined any attempt to farm that area. This suggests that the debris from the blast plunged into the Dead Sea, creating a bit of a tidal wave that drenched the entire area with salt water, one of the most intense sea salt waters in the world. This substantiates my theory of a salt spray coating Lot's wife after she became petrified from the blast, from which it would have correctly been said that she literally turned into a pillar of salt. By the way, Tal Kafrain, several miles north of Tal El-Hammam, has been considered to be the site of Gomorrah, shown on this map. Now, let me say here that there has been little to no remains found in the southeast area of the Dead Sea, compared to what has been found at the Tal El-Hammam excavation. Further, the Tal El-Hammam location is not newly considered as ancient Sodom. For as early as the 4th century AD until the 19th century, scholars held to the consensus that Sodom and Gomorrah were located on the northeast edge of the Dead Sea in Jordan. All in all, where it happened is not as important as that it did happen, and from it we learn the price of rebellion against God's order. Paul wrote, and I quote, "For this cause gave them up unto vile affections, for even their women did change the natural use into that which is against nature. And likewise also the men, leaving the natural use of the woman, burned in their lust one toward another, men with men working that which is unseemly, and receiving in themselves that recompense of their error which was meet." Romans 1:26 and 27. Further, we learn from this story not to look back at things lost to us, as did Lot's wife, but to look forward, believing in faith that what the Lord has for us ahead is what's best for us and what has been His plan for our lives from the very beginning. Now, may the Lord Jesus Christ replace all that you have lost in this life with what? "Eye hath not seen, nor ear heard, neither have entered into the heart of man the things which God hath prepared for them that love Him." 1 Corinthians 2:9. Thank you for viewing, and please subscribe for alerts for my next video. You might also want to go to Jan Curcio YouTube channel to view my other presentations, or email me comments and questions at breakingbreadforyou@gmail.com. May God bless you all richly.